Thank you for your time this morning.
Happy to be here.
Let's start. We have to ask you, you've had in your life what someone call an illicit and irresponsible love affair with food.
Yes.
Did you, and if you get the movie reference here, we'll be very impressed. Did you eat because you were unhappy, or were you unhappy because you ate?
Oh, did I eat to live, or did I live to eat?
Exactly.
Like so many kids growing up in the South, particularly where there was a lot of poverty and people weren't sure there was going to be meals the next day, I think there was a combination of the type of food I ate, as well as the fact that I liked to eat a lot of it, and I hated exercise. And when you put that combination together, and then your body gets over the age of 30, you know, it's kind of like filling up the Macy's Day balloons for the parade. You're just going to swell up. It's just inevitable. So, unfortunate life story there, but I found out that any American, any person can change if you want to, and take control, and then not only regain your health, but actually, I'm doing things at age 51 I couldn't do when I was 18.
Well, let me ask you this. That leads to an issue that's very important here in South Carolina, obviously the health care issue. 1/4 of South Carolinians are currently uninsured. Another quarter of South Carolinians are on Medicaid. That's half of our state's population. Yeah. How do you get a handle on this problem? What have you looked at, and what would you incorporate into your presidential platform?
The first thing I did as governor was to initiate a program for children called the Our Kids First program. It preceded SCHIP. In fact, it was somewhat of the model for what SCHIP later became. The key is that you create coverage, but you don't just give it away. That's a real mistake, because if you give people something for nothing, they don't value it. If they have some skin in the game, co-pays, deductibles, some level of responsibility, it works amazingly better, less expensively, and people then have an incentive to take better care of themselves. We also, near the end of my term, did a program for small businesses where they could buy in, pooling with state, federal, employee, and employer resources to provide a base coverage. That's the short term. And there are many, many other elements to it, but the long term, and the only thing that's going to make sense for the health issue, is to change this whole debate from health care to health. We are a diseased country. 80% of our expenses in health care are chronic disease. So we really don't have a health care crisis. We've got a health crisis. We've got a very unhealthy citizenry. And if we can start changing that, and it doesn't happen overnight, that's the only way we're going to survive. A couple of staggering figures. We spend 17% of our nation's GDP on health care in America. There's no other nation on earth spending more than 10.5%. Switzerland does that. If we moved ours down to 11%, if we were to change the health habits of Americans and could be more like the rest of the world in how much we actually have to spend on our health care dollars, the difference between 17 and 11% is $700 billion a year. Now that's a lot of money.
Even in Washington.
Even in Washington, that's a lot of money. We could end the deficit. We could give a tax cut. I mean, I'm just thinking of all the things that could be done. $700 billion a year is a lot of money. Even Congress would have a hard time. Well, no, or say Congress would have a hard time spending that. No, they wouldn't. But maybe the American people could be the beneficiaries.
Well, since you brought up the spending issue, let's go ahead and ask this question. Why does the Cato Institute not like you? They gave you, I believe, a 46 on their most recent governor's report card. Let's talk about fiscal issues. First of all, how do you respond to the charges that you're weak on fiscal conservatism?
I've cut taxes 90 times as an Arkansas governor. First ever broad-based tax cut. Eliminated the marriage penalty, doubled the child tax cut credit, homestead tax exemption for property. We cut capital gains. We indexed the income tax for inflation. We lifted the threshold at which people paid income taxes. I give them an F for their grading methodology. And I'm not sure where some of their figures come from. Now, there's a couple of things they hit me with. They say, you raised gasoline taxes. Guilty. However, we put that on the ballot, and the people voted. We gave them an opportunity to choose. 80% of our population voted for that. 80%. I'd say we're in pretty good shape. And it created 40,000 jobs and put $1 billion of capital in our infrastructure, and really took us from having the worst to some of the best roads in America. There was a Supreme Court order on education where we were ruled unconstitutional on funding for both equity and adequacy. Not really a choice there.
Right.
So there was a tax associated with that. The one tax they hit me for, I didn't sign, didn't support, but I did support its repeal 2 years later, which in fact it was repealed. So I get credit for something I didn't do, and I don't get credit for something I did do. Those are the kinds of things. And so honestly, if anyone looks at my overall record, to be a Republican governor in a state where 86% of elected officials are Democrats, and to have 90 tax cuts, and to change the culture really of fiscal conservatism, and to do a lot to make our government more efficient, I'd love for people to take a real good look at my record and they'd say, there's a true Reagan conservative.
So you don't mind that debate is what you're telling us?
No, I welcome it, because right now I'm battling. I mean, obviously there are people out there who would love to say Mike Huckabee is not a real fiscal conservative. You know, he's a big tax and spender. The record doesn't reflect that. 91% of the Arkansas budget is education, prisons, and Medicaid. Everything else in all of state government in my state is in the last 9%. During the course of the recession in 01-02, we actually cut 11% out of our state budget. It's a pretty big cut when you only have 9% margin. That's what I'm saying, that there's a problem sometimes with national groups, and I think they're good guys and they mean well, and that they're trying to just sort of make a generalized judgment. The problem is every state is unique and different in how it budgets, how it accounts for its money, who's responsible, what is under the governor's control and what is not, and whether there's a court case. All states have to balance a budget. That's one thing. Unlike the federal government that can print or borrow money, we can't do that. So we got to balance the budget. They sometimes will take this template that they've created in Washington and just lay it over 50 states, and it may be that the template is what's faulty, not the way we manage the state budget.
Let us ask you this. You look at the field for 2008, obviously John McCain, Rudy Giuliani, Mitt Romney would probably be considered that top tier of candidates. How do you break into that group and I guess away from the Tancredo, Hunter, Brownback contingent? What do you see as the key to positioning you in that top tier GOP candidates?
Well, right now the whole process has been about celebrity, not about substance. And it's all driven by how much money have you raised, not what kind of ideas have you raised. As that begins to change, and it is, it's going to change, people are going to start saying, now, when is it that you just came to this view of being pro-life? How long has it been since you've really been for the Second Amendment? And Republican voters aren't stupid. They're going to start asking these questions, and they're not going to want to know, what are you saying today? They're going to want to know, what have you been saying through your career? And not just what you've been saying, what have you been doing? And so when our records reflect our rhetoric, then I think things are going to change pretty dramatically.
Candidates like you have made a point to kind of distance yourself from that political sounding rhetoric. You're much more accessible, certainly in your TV appearances on The Daily Show, The Colbert Report. How important is that to your campaign, being a genuine candidate?
I think it's incredibly important. I feel that it's part of how I will get to the finish line, is that people ultimately look for authenticity. They want to know that there's something there other than a very carefully consultant programmed sort of mass of flesh that goes about like a robot spouting out what he's been told. That's why I like to do things that are unconventional, like the Colbert Show or the Daily Show, because on those kind of programs, they're not going to sit there and ask you these very serious questions about what do you think, what would you do about Iraq. First of all, I always say, beware of someone who has an answer for every issue and can solve every problem. He doesn't need to be president, he needs to be benevolent dictator. First of all, the number one quality of a leader is that you need to know what you don't know. Nobody knows everything. And I always like to say, no one's right all the time, and the other guys aren't wrong all the time. Part of what's wrong in government today, we've got Democrats and Republicans who get on other sides of the room and they don't even listen or talk to each other. Now, you know, I have to come to the conclusion, Republicans aren't right all the time. Democrats aren't wrong all the time. Most of the time they are, but not all the time. And at times, you know, if I would find out, guys, what is it you want? Tell me why you see it the way you do. Not what, but why. I may learn something. I may not change my convictions. I'm not going to suddenly become pro-abortion or anything that would violate my conscience. But I may find out that the way in which they would get to say, fixing Social Security. Might be not exactly how I would approach it, but it might not be completely off base. And if we can start from where we agree rather than from where we disagree, it's how I governed in a state where I had an overwhelming constituency of legislature who was Democrat.
Governor, we appreciate it. Thank you for your time this
Thank
morning.
you.
Good luck.
Thank you, Will.
Yes, sir.
Great to be with you.
Absolutely.
And keep playing the bass, man.
Absolutely.